They laughed when the shepherd volunteered for sniper duty. A man who'd never fired a military rifle, whose only qualification was herding sheep in the Italian mountains. The officers dismissed him with a wave. But 6 weeks later, those same officers would be searching desperately for the ghost who was systematically eliminating their command structure, one impossible shot at a time. His name was Giovanni Mancini, and what he built in those hills would rewrite the manual on acoustic warfare. This is the story of how a lone shepherd turned the mountains themselves into a weapon, creating what military historians would later call the Hill Echo Sniper Trap, a tactical innovation so devastatingly effective that it fooled an entire German battalion into believing they were under attack by a phantom sniper company. By the time they figured out the truth, 14 of their officers were dead, and Giovanni? He was already 3 valleys away. September 1943. The Italian front. The Allies had just landed, and Italy had switched sides. Chaos reigned in the mountain villages as partisan fighters formed from farmers, bakers, and, yes, shepherds. Giovanni Mancini was 34 years old when he walked into the partisan recruitment camp in the village of Castellina. He had weathered skin, calloused hands, and eyes that could spot a wolf on a ridge 2 kilometers away. The recruiting officer, a former Italian army sergeant named Carlo Rossini, looked him up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "Can you shoot?" Rossini asked. "No, signore," Giovanni replied simply. "Then what use are you?" Giovanni looked out at the mountains, those ancient giants he'd walked every day for 3 decades. "I know these hills like I know my own children. Every valley, every echo, every place where sound plays tricks." Rossini frowned. "We need fighters, not tour guides." But the partisan commander, a British SOE agent named Captain James Fletcher, overheard the exchange. Fletcher had been in these mountains for 2 months, and he'd noticed something strange. Sounds behaved differently here. A shot fired in one valley could be heard echoing from 3 different directions. His men had gotten lost, tracking the source of German gunfire more than once. "Wait," Fletcher said, stepping forward. "Tell me more about these echoes." Giovanni explained what he'd learned over 3 decades in the hills. When you spent every day listening for the bleating of lost sheep, you learned to read sound like others read books. In the valley of Sant'Angelo, if you fire from the western ridge, the echo bounces off Monte Calvo and sounds like it came from the east. The Germans set up camp there last week. I watched them shooting at shadows for an hour, trying to find partisans that didn't exist. He continued, describing how certain cliff faces acted like acoustic mirrors, how narrow ravines could channel sound and make a single rifle shot sound like 3. How temperature inversions at dawn and dusk could carry sound for miles, or trap it entirely. Fletcher's eyes narrowed with interest. This wasn't just folklore. This was tactical intelligence. "Show me," Fletcher said. They gave Giovanni an old Carcano M91-38 rifle, the standard Italian infantry weapon. Not a sniper rifle, just a regular infantry piece with iron sights. They took him to a ridge overlooking a practice valley. "See that tree stump? 400 meters. Take a shot." Giovanni had never fired a military rifle, but he'd used his grandfather's hunting rifle since he was 12. The principles were the same. Breathe, squeeze, follow through. The shot cracked out. The stump exploded in a shower of splinters. Rossini's jaw dropped. "Madonna! Again!" 3 more shots, 3 more hits. Giovanni's hands were steady, his breathing controlled. Years of sitting motionless on mountainsides, watching for predators, had given him a patience most soldiers never learned. But it was what happened next that changed everything. Notice where the echo came from, Giovanni asked. Fletcher had been so focused on the target, he hadn't paid attention to the sound. But now that Giovanni mentioned it, the echo had seemed to come from behind them, not in front. The cliff face, Giovanni explained, pointing to a rock wall 200 meters to their left. The sound bounces. If someone was trying to find me by listening, they'd look in the wrong place entirely. Fletcher's mind raced. In modern warfare, the crack of a sniper's rifle was often the only way to locate them. Soldiers were trained to identify sniper positions by sound. But what if the sound itself was a lie? How many places like this are there in these mountains? Fletcher asked. Giovanni smiled. Hundreds. Over the next week, Giovanni and Fletcher developed what would become the Hill Echo Sniper Trap. The concept was brilliantly simple. Use the mountain's natural acoustics to create false sniper positions, while Giovanni fired from completely different locations. But it required 3 elements. Giovanni spent days walking the hills with Fletcher, mapping every echo point, every acoustic dead zone, every place where sound did something unexpected. They created what Fletcher called acoustic ghosts, positions where a shot would echo so convincingly from another location that even experienced soldiers would be fooled. They marked 23 locations on their maps, prime shooting positions where the natural acoustic properties would create perfect misdirection. They couldn't just shoot randomly. Giovanni needed to create a pattern that would make the Germans believe they were facing multiple snipers. So they designed a rotation. Take a shot from position A, which echoes from position X. Move immediately to position B, which echoes from position Y. Wait 30-45 minutes. Take another shot from position C, which echoes from position Z. The Germans would hear shots coming from X, Y, and Z, and never even look toward positions A, B, or C. This was psychological warfare at its finest. Giovanni wouldn't shoot regular soldiers. He would exclusively target officers and NCOs, men with visible rank insignia, men giving orders, men gathered around maps. Why? Because nothing creates chaos in a military unit faster than losing its leadership. And nothing creates paranoia faster than leadership being systematically eliminated by an enemy you can't find. They upgraded Giovanni's rifles slightly. Fletcher acquired a German scope from a captured position, a Zeiss Silvia 4X scope, originally mounted on a captured Kar 98K. Their partisan armorer managed to mount it on Giovanni's Carcano. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The scope was critical because Giovanni would be taking shots at 400 to 600 meters, beyond what iron sights could reliably handle. And with the echoes masking his position, he could take his time aiming. They also gave him a ghillie suit, though Giovanni modified it extensively using local vegetation. Store-bought camouflage stands out in these hills, he explained. You need to blend with what's actually growing here. Finally, they worked out an escape protocol. After each shot, Giovanni would have a pre-planned extraction route. He'd move immediately, never staying in one position longer than it took to line up and take the shot. One shot, one move. No exceptions. For 5 days they practiced. Giovanni would take shots at targets while Fletcher and other partisans tried to locate him using only sound. They failed every single time. On one practice run, Giovanni fired from a ridge on the north side of a valley. The echo bounced so perfectly off the southern cliffs that Fletcher's tracking team spent 20 minutes searching the wrong mountainside entirely. It's like fighting a ghost, one partisan muttered. Fletcher smiled grimly. That's exactly what we want. October 7th, 1943, 6:47 a.m. The German battalion occupying the region around Castellina was commanded by Oberstleutnant Hans Dietrich, a veteran officer who'd fought in France and Russia. His battalion was preparing for a patrol sweep through the valleys, searching for partisan activity. Giovanni watched from a ridge 550 meters away as the German officers gathered around a map table outside their command tent. The morning sun was just cresting the mountains, and the temperature inversion was perfect. Sound would carry, but in unpredictable ways. He identified Dietrich immediately. The man stood straight, pointing at the map with authority. Two other officers flanked him, a Hauptmann and an Oberleutnant. Giovanni chambered around. The Carcano's action was smooth from decades of Italian army service. He settled the scope's crosshairs on the Hauptmann, not the highest-ranking officer, but the one with the clearest shot profile. Breathe in, half exhale, hold, squeeze. The rifle cracked. 550 meters away, the Hauptmann collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. The other officers scattered, diving for cover. But here's where Giovanni's genius revealed itself. The Germans looked east. Every single soldier who'd heard the shot looked east, toward the cliff face that had caught and redirected the sound. Officers shouted orders. Men scrambled to defensive positions, facing the wrong direction entirely. Giovanni was already moving west, slipping down the far side of his ridge like the ghost they couldn't see. Over the next 3 days, Giovanni struck 4 more times. Each shot came from a different location. Each echo pointed the Germans somewhere completely wrong. And each target was an officer. Day 2. An Oberleutnant surveying a bridge. 480 meters. 1 shot. Down. Day 3. A Feldwebel conducting morning formation. 620 meters. The longest shot Giovanni had attempted. The bullet caught the sergeant in the chest. Down. Day 4. 2 officers traveling together on a mountain road. Giovanni waited until they stopped to check their map. 2 shots, 4 seconds apart, both down. The German battalion was in chaos. Dietrich ordered his men to dig in, to avoid exposed positions, to move only under heavy guard. But how do you guard against an enemy you can't locate? An enemy whose shots seem to come from everywhere and nowhere? Worse, the acoustic confusion was absolute. After the bridge shooting, German soldiers spent 2 hours pouring fire into a hillside where they swore the shot had come from. They found nothing, because Giovanni had fired from a completely different valley entirely. Dietrich was no fool. He knew they were facing either an exceptional sniper or multiple snipers working in coordination. He brought in a specialized counter-sniper team, 3 experienced Gebirgsjäger, mountain troops, with scope-equipped KAR-98K rifles. Their job? Find and eliminate the partisan sniper. But they were hunting using conventional tactics, acoustic triangulation, muzzle flash detection, observation of likely positions, everything in the manual. Everything that didn't work when the mountains themselves were lying to you. On day 6, Giovanni spotted the counter-sniper team setting up a position on a ridge across from one of his planned shooting locations. They were good, well camouflaged, patient, watching with binoculars. They were also 680 meters away. Giovanni had never attempted a shot beyond 620 meters. At this distance, bullet drop was significant. Wind would be a major factor. His Carcano, while accurate, wasn't designed for extreme range precision shooting. But the counter-snipers represented an existential threat. If they figured out his system, the entire operation collapsed. He studied the wind, watched the grass and leaves, calculated the drop. The lead counter-sniper was scanning with binoculars, his profile exposed for just a moment. Giovanni adjusted his aim, holding high and right to compensate for drop and wind. Breathe. Squeeze. The shot took nearly a full second to reach its target. The counter-sniper jerked backward, his binoculars falling from his hands. The other two counter-snipers dove for cover, frantically searching for where the shot had come from. The echo had bounced off 3 different surfaces. They had no idea. Giovanni was already moving. By day 10, Giovanni had eliminated 12 German officers and NCOs. The battalion's command structure was in shambles. Junior officers were being promoted into positions they weren't ready for. Men were terrified to leave cover. Patrols moved in tight, bunched formations, ironically making them more vulnerable to conventional partisan attacks. But more importantly, the story was spreading. Other partisan groups heard about the Ghost of Castellina, the phantom sniper who struck from impossible distances and vanished like morning mist. Some said he could be in 2 places at once. Others claimed he'd made a pact with the mountain spirits. The truth was simpler and somehow more impressive. Giovanni was just a shepherd who understood his home. Fletcher leveraged the legend brilliantly. He started spreading false information through local networks, stories of not 1, but 5 partisan snipers operating in the region, each with their own territory, each as deadly as the last. The Germans couldn't know it was all one man, one rifle, one person who knew every acoustic trick in these ancient mountains. Day 13 nearly ended everything. Giovanni was setting up for a shot on a German officer inspecting a defensive position when he noticed movement on a ridge 200 meters to his right. A German patrol had changed their route, something they'd started doing to avoid predictability. They hadn't seen him yet, but they would in seconds. Giovanni had 2 choices: take the shot and reveal his position, or abandon the mission and escape. The smart tactical choice was obvious, but the officer he was targeting was Oberstleutnant Dietrich himself, the battalion commander. Taking him down would completely decapitate the German command. Giovanni made his decision in half a heartbeat. He fired. Dietrich's adjutant, standing next to the commander, collapsed. Not the commander himself. At the last instant, Dietrich had stepped aside to point at something, and his adjutant had moved into the line of fire. The German patrol on the ridge heard the shot and immediately started scanning, but the echo had directed them away from Giovanni's actual position. Still, they were close enough that any movement would give him away. Giovanni lay absolutely still. 20 years of waiting motionless for wolves to approach his flock had trained him for exactly this moment. He controlled his breathing, slowed his heart rate, became part of the mountain. The German patrol swept past 50 meters away. They were looking down into the valley where the echo had originated. One soldier walked within 15 meters of Giovanni's position, so close Giovanni could hear him muttering nervously in German. Then they moved on. Giovanni waited another 30 minutes before slipping away like water through fingers. Day 15. The Germans were withdrawing. The combination of partisan attacks, supply line harassment, and the psychological terror of the phantom sniper had made the position untenable. They were pulling back to more defensible positions 20 kilometers south. Fletcher told Giovanni the job was done, mission accomplished. The Germans were leaving, which was the strategic objective all along. But Giovanni had one more target in mind. Oberstleutnant Dietrich was overseeing the withdrawal personally, standing on a ridge, watching his convoy move through the valley below. He was surrounded by guards, 6 men in a tight perimeter, all scanning constantly for threats. The shot was 710 meters, well beyond Giovanni's confirmed range. Uphill, with a crosswind, through a narrow gap in the perimeter that would only be open for seconds at a time. Fletcher begged him not to try it. Too risky, too far. The mission was complete. Giovanni loaded a round into his carcano. "I'm a shepherd," he said quietly. "I finish what I start." He waited for 90 minutes, patient as stone, watching, reading the wind, calculating the impossible mathematics of trajectory and chance. And then the gap appeared. Dietrich stepped forward to shout an order to the convoy below. For exactly 3 seconds, he was exposed. Giovanni breathed out, squeezed. The shot was in the air for over a second. Time enough for doubt. Time enough for wind to push the bullet off course. Time enough for Dietrich to move. He didn't move. The Oberstleutnant fell, struck in the shoulder. Not a fatal wound, but enough. The German commander of the Castellina occupation, taken down by a shepherd with a modified rifle and 3 decades of mountain knowledge. The guards immediately opened fire in every direction. The echo had convinced them the shot came from the convoy itself. They were shooting at their own men in the confusion. Giovanni melted into the rocks and was gone before they ever looked in his direction. The German withdrawal from the Castellina region was chaotic and demoralizing. In official reports, they blamed concentrated partisan sniper activity, estimating they'd faced a team of 5 to 7 highly skilled marksmen. It was one man, one rifle, and an intimate knowledge of how sound moves through mountains. Giovanni Mancini returned to shepherding after the war. He rarely spoke about his time as a partisan fighter. When pressed by historians in the 1960s, he simply said, "The mountains taught me everything. I just listened." The Hill Echo sniper trap became a case study in unconventional warfare. Special forces units studied Giovanni's tactics, how he'd weaponized natural acoustics to create phantom enemies and mask his true position. The concept has been adapted by modern snipers operating in mountainous terrain from Afghanistan to Kurdistan. In 15 days of operation, 14 confirmed officer NCO eliminations. 710 meters, longest confirmed shot. 0 friendly casualties. 1 shepherd who refused to let his mountains be occupied. Today, if you visit Castellina, local guides will show you the ridges where Giovanni operated. Some of the echo points still work exactly as they did in 1943. Fire a shot in one place, hear it boom from somewhere completely different. The mountains remember. And sometimes, in the early morning, when mist hangs in the valleys, old-timers swear they can still hear the crack of Giovanni's carcano echoing from ridge to ridge. The ghost of Castellina, still watching over his hills. They laughed when the shepherd volunteered for sniper duty. 14 German officers never laughed again.